think most people know this, right? So procrastinating is probably one of the biggest mistakes to make in the college application process. I mean, there are a couple of main reasons for this, for obvious reasons. One is that in the admissions world, timing is everything. Okay, there are a couple of key reasons here. So the first is that we typically advise students to just like strategically submit their applications about 2 to 4 weeks before any deadline. Now, you might think to yourself, wow, that's a lot of lead time, but there is a reason for that. Okay, for one, colleges do see the timestamp of when you submit your college apps. So they'll know, right? So if you're submitting it at the very last minute, if you're submitting it at like 11:59 p.m. of the day of the deadline, it kind of says things about you and your punctuality and how you prioritize your time. So it's not a good look, right? Two is strategically, there's also a window, during which many admissions officers are coming back to the office after doing their sort of visits to local high schools, part of their territory. And so they have a chance to be able to read through these applications when not all the applications are in there, okay? So many times, like many admissions people I've talked to, feel like they want to get a head start or a jump before every single application goes through their system. So this could be an opportunity. Now, it's not guaranteed that they would take a look at it during this window, but many admissions people choose to want to like get that head start. It's sort of like if you're in high school, if you get a lot of homework on a given day, you might want to try to see if you can get a head start before you get home, right? Try to see if you can cut down on the amount of work you have to do. And of course, admissions people are people, right? So they will take these opportunities to go ahead and cut down on the work they might have later on to sort of alleviate their stress later on, okay? So one of the key things that you want to be able to do then is to take advantage of this crucial window is to be able to have a timeline in place for when you are going to want to work on these applications. So if you are following the advice of a seasoned expert who can guide you through this process, it can not only help you, manage your workflow better, it can alleviate a lot of your stress, okay? Because oftentimes for seniors, they get major writer's block when they don't know what to say, and because they're so stressed by the amount of work they have to do, it becomes counterproductive. And so being able to be guided by someone who's had experience going through this process numerous times and oftentimes for many years can help you get your best work together in a timely fashion. Okay. One other thing that is not commonly talked about is that if you can get your application in well before the deadline, it actually puts you in a better position to be able to secure an interview. Right. So there's this common misconception that interviews operate the same way they do in the workplace, where if you do get an interview, it's because they screened you and they like your application better. Oftentimes for colleges, that's not the case, right? In the years that I served as a Harvard interviewer, I never once got access to an actual student's application. So all I got was the student's name, email address, phone number, where they went to where their high school is. And so there's not really any way for me to screen which ones I would deem more qualified than others before the actual interview. So if you know this, that gives you an extra advantage in terms of submitting your applications earlier and then having a better chance to be matched with an interviewer, okay? So it pays to really be able to kind of like, send your applications in well before the deadline, okay? Next is, there are also tons of horror stories, unfortunately, of students that wait too late before they submit their applications. Even if, there's the obvious, if you actually miss the deadline, that's not very good, right? So you definitely want to avoid that. But there are a lot of unpredictable things that could happen even the day of the deadline or even the day before the deadline, okay? There were a couple of years, for example, where the whole UC, University of California server crashed, right? Because there were way too many applications and they couldn't handle the number of, applications being processed. So the entire server crashed. And, we've heard of students who are immediately panicked and stressed out because they weren't able to submit their applications. Obviously, that could be a very traumatizing experience for many students. Thankfully, though, the following Monday, this happened on a Friday, right? The following Monday, the UC sent out notifications that they did extend the deadline, but you can't always bank on the graciousness and leniency of these colleges, right? So it is up to you, right, to make sure that you can submit your application to avoid any sort of these disasters, because there's stuff you can control, but then it's worse when there's things that you can't control and that, that prevents you from submitting your application, even if you're still before the deadline, okay? There are also cases, for instance, where a student, and this was relayed to me by a former student of ours, who said like their friend submitted most of the application, but not the entire application, because there was a part of the application that also had a separate submit button, right? So if you were on top of things and if someone was going through your work to make sure it was done in the right way, you could catch these things before they happen, right? Yet another student forgot to send in their official test scores when it was required by a certain deadline. So it all really amounts to making sure that you have a very long view of all the different things you need in college application and prepare well ahead of time. So if you're the type of person who tends to procrastinate, and unfortunately, even if you might have gotten away with it throughout most of high school and still managed to get A's, you know who you are, right? Some students are really adept at doing things at the very last minute, turning out essays the night before and still getting A's. That's not necessarily the best philosophy for college applications, and it's an entirely different thing from what you're used to in high school. So I urge you to really take it seriously, because this is not just a one-time thing, right? Your next 4 years are contingent on this, so it really makes sense for you to really give it the attention it deserves. Okay. All right. So typically for HS2, we have a very detailed roadmap that our students will follow. So even by the second semester of their junior year, our students are typically already working on their college application essays. We typically start with the UC essays because those prompts have not changed for many years. And so it's a safe bet that you can go ahead and start without having to worry about the colleges changing the prompts on you, okay? Because if the UCs were to announce a change of their essay prompts, there's a lead time of 1.5 to 2 years, right? So this is definitely a smart call if you wanted to get a head start to alleviate some of the work later on. Oftentimes during the summer, we have our students work on their personal statements. By around August and September, the work shifts gears into working on their early action and early decision essays, right? And then we start working on, at this point, we prioritize certain colleges as their priority supplements. And usually by early to mid-December, all HS2 students are done, because we don't want people stressing out and trying to submit at the last minute, right? Obviously December, we want students to really just enjoy the holidays with their family, right? So this is the best way in our experiences to make sure that students are stress-free and they still have ample time to put together quality applications.